Well, in comparison with the national political stage, things appear to be rather orderly at the moment in Lansing. That's not to say there won't be some robust debate in the weeks and months ahead, as Republicans hope to use their majority to pass legislation to their liking, but on the other side of the political aisle, Democrats have their own ideas. And this morning, we'll look at things from their perspective. It starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Now, here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, State Representative Sam Singh is serving his third term in the Michigan House of Representatives. He was selected to serve this term as the House Democratic leader. He represents Michigan's 69th House District, which includes East Lansing and the surrounding area. Representative Singh served as the Democratic floor leader in his second term. Welcome to Upper Michigan on the Ryan Report.
Thank you for having me on the show.
You know, we often get visitors from Lansing in the summer, so it's nice to see somebody in the winter. It doesn't happen as often.
Absolutely. I've had an opportunity to be up here a number of times during the winter, whether it was to talk about nonprofit issues or visit some of the universities, so it's always good to be here during this time of year.
Speaking of universities and representing East Lansing, you must be a Michigan State fan.
I am. I'm a graduate of Michigan State University, a strong fan, and over the last 4 years in the legislature, I've actually been on the Appropriations Committee for Higher Education. Okay. And it's been something that's been a real passion of mine, and we've got 3 great universities up here in the Upper Peninsula that we want to make sure get the appropriate resources.
And you know, of course, Coach Tom Izzo is from the Upper Peninsula.
Absolutely. We do know that, and he's obviously been a hallmark not only for our football program, but a great ambassador for the university.
And he actually had his first coaching job about 7 or 8 miles west of here at Ishpeming.
Sure.
So, your parents immigrated to Michigan from India in the 1960s. To pursue the American dream.
That's right.
You were the first Indian American in the Michigan legislature. Does all the talk that's going on now about immigration, you know, what's your thought about that with your background in history?
Sure. Well, you know, my parents came here because of that opportunity, the American dream, like so many people that have come over the decades and generations to this country. My dad wanted to find that opportunity. He went to North Carolina State to get an engineering degree. He got picked up by Ford Motor Company as soon as he graduated. And he worked there for 35 years. You know, it was a great opportunity for him to provide for our family. My brother and I went to public schools. I ended up going to Michigan State University, and we really were taught by my parents that you got to give back to your community. You got to give back to the state that gave him so much. And that's one of the things that makes me, you know, really proud to be involved in, whether it was local politics in East Lansing or here now on the state level at the state legislature, just making sure that we have the same opportunities I had while I was growing up here in Michigan in the 1970s.
And since you mentioned that, like a couple of your Democratic colleagues from the UP, you did serve in local government prior to your service in the House.
That's right. I spent 12 years in local government. I did 10 years as a city council member, and then I did 1 term of 2 years as the mayor of the city of East Lansing. Okay. And had the opportunity, obviously, to work with a number of elected officials across the state, obviously having Representative John Kevla as a former mayor as well. One of the things I found in the legislature, when you come from local government, whether it was a school board or other types of local government, you really find how to do things in a very pragmatic way. If there wasn't a Republican way or a Democratic way to run the city, right. There's just a way to do it in a right and pragmatic way, and that's the type of things I've tried to bring to the legislature in my new leadership position.
You, in your State of the State response to the governor's address, you said it's time for our budget to reflect the values of people of our state, and that's why House Democrats want to prioritize investments in schools, local communities, and critical programs that help our friends and neighbors take advantage of job opportunities. Let's talk about those things. First of all, schools. What do Democrats want to accomplish this year for our public school systems?
Sure. Well, the governor has a report on his desk that he commissioned to make sure that we were actually funding our public schools to the appropriate level. And that report found across the state that we're actually underfunding schools to about $1,200 per pupil. And so one of the things I wanted to say as we looked at the state of the state and the governor's budget message that just came out last week is that we have to prioritize those dollars, because what we've seen across the state is larger classroom sizes. And we know that those teachers have a harder time teaching those kids, and that's why we're not doing as well on the tests as the kids grow from 3rd grade to middle school to high school. And so we want to make sure that we reprioritize resources and dollars so those class sizes go down to a reasonable level, that our teachers then have the skills and the technology to be able to teach our young people so that they're ready for the jobs once they graduate.
Based on what the governor proposed and what your colleagues on the other side of the aisle have said, Do you think it's going to happen that you can reach that goal?
Well, we want to reach the full goal of the full funding in this first budget cycle, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. I was pleased that there was one element that we've been really talking about as Democrats, which has been making sure that we have career and technical education in our school systems to make sure as you're graduating from high school that you don't always want to go to college. There are some people who want to go into the trades, and let's provide a pathway for them. And so I was pleased in this budget that the governor specifically put new dollars and resources towards that. Will help school districts and ISDs, those intermediate school districts across the state, actually put more resources into CTE, as they call it, the career and technical education, and that was a priority of ours. I was pleased to see that it ended up in the governor's budget.
Actually, in a way, it goes back many years when we did some of those kinds of things in schools and then got away from it. And we started to get back into career technical education in recent years. Are we moving further along the path?
Absolutely, but I do think that's one thing that we're seeing right now. Obviously, we have to focus on the K through 12 students so they're prepared, but we also have a lot of jobs in the skilled trades that are open right now that we can't sometimes find skilled trade workers to work in. And so one of the priorities for Democrats is to make sure that we have the training programs, the apprenticeship programs, so people can have access to these jobs. There are going to be a lot of people that need to retool their careers, and as they do that, we want to make sure that there's enough training dollars available so they can then move into some of these jobs that are available right now, but we just don't have the capacity to do that. We lost a lot of people who moved out of the state during the recession, and now we have to find those new people either to move back or we got to retrain our people here in the state of Michigan. And unfortunately, we don't put enough resources into that training, and so that's going to be one of our priorities as we go through this budget cycle, is to try to push our Republican colleagues to put more money towards that training so people can access these jobs right now.
Okay, I want to follow up on that, but we have to take a break. I'll be back with more on the Ryan Report in just 2 minutes. We're talking with the House Democratic leader Sam Singh, State Representative. We were talking about education and training. I know this is one of the other areas you were concerned about. Career technical education is certainly part of it. There's obviously more to that too, isn't there, as far as getting people trained for the right jobs?
Absolutely, and that's other piece is our higher education budget. Unfortunately, when the governor came in 2011, he cut all of our public universities by 15%. And we're just catching up in the last year and this year's budget to try to make some of those universities whole. So what that has unfortunately done is just increase the amount that young people are paying to go to college, and that makes it much more difficult for them. Now you're seeing the average undergraduate getting about $35,000 worth of debt before they get an undergraduate degree. Well, there used to be a point in time where you could actually work a job and make enough resources and pay for college as you went. Right. That's not something you can do with the high cost of tuition. And so one of the things we want to really focus on is making sure that there's more financial aid available to these students to make sure that they don't have to have as much debt, because I want them to graduate, be ready for those jobs, but then also be able to buy a house and buy the things that they need to help our economy grow, not just pay down debt.
As you mentioned a few minutes ago, we do have 3 universities here in the Upper Peninsula. All struggle somewhat to make it go financially. And there is some feeling on the part, especially those on the lower end of the scale, that this idea of limiting tuition increase to a certain percentage works against the schools on the bottom of that list. You know, if you're getting less to start with, a percentage increase is going to give you less, you know, going forward.
That's right.
Are we likely to continue to see that kind of a formula?
Unfortunately, that has been the formula that's been introduced every year in the governor's budget, and he also has included that this year. Now, the one thing I will say is that we've got a number of business leaders from across the state that have been really trying to push the administration to invest more into higher education. There's a group, Business Leaders of Michigan. They're the CEOs of some of the top companies, and they're really concerned about the talent to make sure that they have the employees available to their companies as their aging workforce begins to retire. And what they're seeing is that we need to invest more. They estimate about $100 million a year more is necessary to make sure that we have the funding necessary for these institutions. And so we definitely need more of the 3 institutions up here in the Upper Peninsula, because they have smaller size of university. They end up not getting as much revenue through this, and that's why you have to take a look at each of these situations in a more unique way instead of just having a blanket formula. And that's why I think the formula hasn't necessarily always worked for the institutions up here in the Upper Peninsula.
I haven't seen any studies lately, but there was a time when Michigan really lagged behind many other states in the number of college graduates it turned out. Is that still the case?
That's still the case. We've made some progress towards that. I know the governor and a number of education leaders are trying to increase that number higher and higher every year, because so many of our jobs, even our skilled jobs, require some level of additional education once you graduate from high school. And so we definitely need to be doing more, but one of the biggest deterrents is that cost factor, and that's why other states have invested more. For us to catch up to other states in the amount of financial aid, we'd have to at least invest another $300 million into that financial aid directly to students. And if we want to be in the top 10 states, we have to look at that. And that's been one of my critiques of the governor and some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, is that we've not necessarily made those investments. And so our students, as well as our universities, end up being a little further behind than other parts of the country.
We also have to have training programs for those who aren't going on to college, although they probably need some additional education. Are we doing enough in that area?
We haven't. You know, as I mentioned before, the CTE programs in the schools are very important, so those who don't see a pathway to going to college for themselves have that opportunity. But there are a lot of people right now that need to have additional training. And so, as I mentioned earlier, having those dollars available for training so people can get in those skilled trades, even if they're making a career change, is something that's necessary. And so more dollars and resources have to be put into that. Too often we wait for Washington, D.C. to give us those dollars. I do think we have to use part of the state budget now to help people get those jobs today.
Even though there's so much focus on unemployment, I know there are a number of major employers in the Upper Peninsula where jobs go unfilled because they can't find qualified people.
Absolutely, and that's why we have this gap right now, this skills gap, and that's where this additional dollars and resources to retrain people so they can be ready for those jobs is really necessary. You know, our unemployment has been better in the last few years, but unfortunately many people aren't feeling the benefit of the full economy, so they're potentially sometimes working two jobs to try to make ends meet, and that's something we have to be focused on, to make sure that we have higher paying jobs for people so they feel some kind of security in their financial situation.
In your response to the state of the state, you also mentioned support to local communities. What was your concern there?
Well, I don't have to tell any local mayor or township supervisor here in the Upper Peninsula. They have seen cuts from the state government. The state government over the last 15 years, and it's happened over both administrations, have cut about $7.5 billion to local communities. That's why we have 5,000 less police officers, 5,000 less firefighters throughout this entire state. So we're actually less safe today because of some of those changes. And the government has tried to balance the budget on the state level on the backs of these local communities. And so what I'm saying is, now that times are getting better, it's time to reinvest back into those communities. Give them back the dollars and resources that we took away, and make sure they begin to get whole. They're struggling with trying to meet their long-term liabilities. They also need infrastructure changes here in the state, invest more into sewer systems and the water systems to make sure that we have safe drinking water. We obviously saw the crisis in Flint. We saw a huge sinkhole created in Macomb County. Our infrastructure is really struggling throughout the state, whether it's our roads, our bridges, or our water systems. And the governor estimates through a commission report there's $4 billion worth of need. If we can focus on that and raise the money for that, we can actually put people back to work today and make our communities safer and more economically competitive.
Okay, we'll talk more about that and some other subjects in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on the Ryan Report after this break. Our guest again this morning is State Representative Sam Singh from the Lansing area, East Lansing area. He's also the House Democratic leader in Michigan. There's been a lot of complaints about what's happened with the unemployment system. First of all, describe for our viewers what went wrong, what happened.
Yeah, it's one of these strange situations. The governor and the Unemployment Insurance Agency wanted to add technology to the department, and what they did is they bought a brand new computer system close to $50 million, and what we ended up finding out after an Auditor General report was that 93% of the time the computer system falsely accused a person who just lost their job, made of this horrible situation within their professional career, falsely accused them of fraud. And so what ended up happening is the computer then would spit out this letter, and then they would send it out to these individuals, and they would then have to pay a 400% penalty, and then they would have to obviously pay back these dollars that the computer said that they had done and taken illegally. In 93% of the cases, these individuals actually had legally deserved their unemployment. They were in that tough time of their lives. And what we found is up to 40,000 people have been falsely accused all over the state. And so to me, it's one of these travesties. I get that our governor is a technology governor, but if you would have actually just sent a person in to talk to these individuals to make sure they understood what actually happened, we would not have this situation. And so we're trying to fight to make sure that every person who got their dollar stolen from them by their government actually get put back to whole.
There's some talk that maybe Michigan's penalties are too draconian even for those who do commit fraud. Perhaps the legislature should look at that. What do you think?
That's one of the proposals that Democrats have put forward. Right now you pay a 400% penalty. No other state does that in the entire country. All the states around us, Ohio, Indiana, they do 100% penalty. So if you have taken money away, you should pay a penalty. We believe in that. But to now charge somebody 400%, and in this case 93% of them were falsely accused, it's time to actually see those dollars go put back into individuals. We want to make sure not only did they get their money back, but they should also get paid interest if the government stole their money.
One of the issues that's got some traction in Lansing now on the other side of the aisle is to cut and eventually eliminate the state income tax. Of course, nobody likes taxes, but is that a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, I'm all for helping people in our middle-class families be able to keep a little bit more of their money, but the plan that you're talking about unfortunately doesn't do that. It actually cuts about $9 billion over the entire time of this cut. From there. That means you're going to cut your police and fire in local communities. You're going to have extreme cuts to your K through 12 schools. So you're going to see this really negative thing. And the average person might see a few dollars every week, but the real winners in that type of situation are going to be millionaires and billionaires that are going to see all this revenue. Democrats have a different type of philosophy and plan. We want to give tax cuts to those that need it, but not those that should be paying their fair share. And to devastate our local communities, our fire and police systems, and our public schools for this tax cut is very irresponsible. I was pleased that the governor and other business leaders have come out opposed to it. I'm very willing to take a look at different types of tax systems and tax breaks for those that are working hard, but I don't think giving tax cuts to billionaires and millionaires is going to really move our economy forward.
Just give us a perspective on what it's like to be the House Democratic leader when obviously you're in the minority, both the House, the Senate, and the governor's office.
Sure. You know, obviously at times we are in that minority position, right. But we found with really strong representatives, and you have some strong representatives up here from the Upper Peninsula that are on the Democratic side, that we can be very pragmatic and work across the aisle. One of the things I've been very proud of is that we've been able to do that. So we've seen good policies created around the budget in a number of instances where we'll work with the governor. So there are opportunities for us to come together. We've got legislators up here in the Upper Peninsula that have been able to cross that aisle to make better policy here for the state. So we'll continue to do that. But at times, you know, when you're in the minority, you might not always get what you want. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the voice of the everyday citizen who's just trying to make ends meet, that their voice is heard, and this budget that we're looking at right now actually helps them succeed. And that's really our focus.
You see part of your responsibility is helping to strengthen the Democratic Party and maybe reverse that trend?
Absolutely. You know, it's one of the things that we see on the local level. There's a lot of energy right now about taking a look at the Democratic Party and how we, you know, talk about the things we've been talking about and the things we've been fighting about, but make sure we message that better in the sense of making sure that people understand what we're fighting for and those values. And that's something we think is really important, because I do think the people of this state want to see good things. Michigan I grew up in, we invested in our schools, we invested in our universities, we had some of the best infrastructure, our roads and our bridges, and that's something we've sort of lost over the last few decades, and that's something I want to be fighting for, to make sure that we have the Michigan. I'm expecting my first child this summer, my wife and I, and I want to make sure that they had the same opportunity that I had growing up here in Michigan.
Thanks very much for joining us today and giving us a perspective from the Democratic Party and also from a representative from downstate, and have a good time in the Upper Peninsula.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. I'll be back with some other thoughts after we take this break. Well, another Super Bowl is in the record books, and some of you are probably happy with the results and others are probably not that happy. Obviously, it was a very entertaining game, and of course, Green Bay Packer fans are disappointed the Packers weren't there, And Lions fans, well, we didn't have those lofty expectations. But what else can we say about this year's event? To start with, it was the 51st edition of the game, which, since they like to use Roman numerals, was billed as Super Bowl LI. You know, it just doesn't work for me. I'm not a huge Roman numeral fan to start with, but when you get up to L and C, it's just not the same as X's and V's. It's not that I can't figure it out, although sometimes it takes a little more thought. It just loses its appeal. Second, and I'm guessing a lot of people may disagree with me on this one, but we've almost reached the point where the entertainment overshadows the football game. Did people go to see the Patriots and the Falcons, or was it Lady Gaga? Nothing against Lady, who was pretty entertaining, and I actually kind of like her. It's just, why? I mean, halftime at a football game serves a purpose. You head for the bathroom, restock your snack plate, get another beverage, have a little conversation, talk about the game so far. Am I wrong? Tell me this, have you ever gone to a concert where they played a little football during the intermission? It's not going to happen. And of course, the third thing is the commercials. Again, are people tuning in to watch the game or the commercials? Some are pretty entertaining. If you're fired up about the game, the entertainment, and the commercials, just when do you take that bathroom break? It's a tough decision. One thing about it, it does have the right name. It's not the NFL championship, it's the Super Bowl. Even with the Roman numerals, it's hard to go wrong with that title. Which brings me to one final point. Most major sports have a special name for their big event. The Super Bowl, the World Series in baseball, NHL's Stanley Cup playoffs, the Masters in golf, and March Madness in college basketball with its Sweet 16, Elite 8, and Final Four. So did you notice that one event is missing? The championship of professional basketball. The series played between the two best teams in the league, as far as I can discern, is simply called the NBA Finals. Is that the best they could do? It just doesn't have that cachet. I'll be back in a minute. Before we go, let me remind you that you can always find the latest news at uppermichigansource.com. And you can also find this show at that same address. Thanks to State Representative Sam Singh, the House Democratic leader, for joining us this morning and providing some insights from his perspective on the issues on the agenda in Lansing. Time to make way for the Today Show. Thank you for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you again next Sunday morning.